Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, there's hardly any amplification here.
So my turn on?
Yeah, it's on. Oh, there we go. Okay. Good. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 O my Lord Sri Krishna, Son of Vasudeva, of all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by Srila Prabhupada, Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order, Chapter 28, Puranjan becomes a woman in the next life. Today's text 21. Katang nu darakadina darakir vaparayana vartishante mayigate bhinnanava ivo dadhau katang nu darakadina darakir vaparayana vartishante mayigate bhinnanava ivo dadhau katang nu darakadina darakir vaparayana vartishante mayigate bhinnanava ivo dadhau. Yeah?
Katanu Darakadina Darakira Parayana Tishnante Mahigate Nava
Ivo dadhau.
Katanu Darakadina Darakir Vaparayana Vartishante
Mayigate
Hinanavaya Vodadhau.
Anyone else? Word for word. Katam.
Katam.
How?
How?
Nu.
Nu.
Indeed.
Indeed.
Darakaha.
Dara.
Sons.
Sons.
Dinaha.
Dina.
Poor. Darakihi.
Dari.
Daughters.
Daughters.
Va.
Va.
Or.
Or.
Aparayanaha.
Aparayana.
Having no one else to depend on.
And no one else to depend on.
Pratishyante.
Krishna.
Will live. Mai.
Mai.
When I. Gate. Gone from this world.
Gone from this world.
Bhinna.
Dina.
Broken.
Broken.
Navaha.
Nava.
Boat.
Both.
Iva.
Viva.
Like.
Like.
Udadhau.
Thou.
In the ocean.
In the ocean.
Translation. King Paranjan continued worrying, quote, after I pass from this world, how will my sons and daughters, who are now fully dependent on me, live and continue their lives? Their position will be similar to that of passengers aboard a ship wrecked in the midst of the ocean. And of course, Paranjan, he can't even vocalize this. He's just thinking this. But this is what he's thinking. Please repeat. King Paranjan continued worrying.
King Paranjan continued worrying.
After I pass from this world,
After I pass from this world,
how will my sons and daughters,
how will my sons and daughters,
who are now fully dependent on me,
who are now fully dependent on me,
live and continue their lives?
live and continue their lives?
Their position will be similar to that
Their position will be similar to that
of passengers aboard a ship
passengers aboard a ship
wrecked in the midst of the ocean.
wrecked in the midst of the ocean.
Srila Prabhupada's purport. At the time of death, every living entity worries about what will happen to his wife and children. Similarly, a politician also worries about what will happen to his country or his political party. Unless one is fully Krishna conscious, he has to accept a body in the next life according to his particular state of consciousness. Since Paranjan is thinking of his wife and children and is overly engrossed in thoughts of his wife, he will accept the body of a woman. Similarly, a politician or so-called nationalist who is inordinately attached to the land of his birth will certainly be reborn in the same land after ending his political career. One's next life will also be affected by the acts one performs during this life. Sometimes politicians act most sinfully for their own sense gratification. It is not unusual for a politician to kill the opposing party. Even though a politician may be allowed to take birth in his so-called homeland, he still has to undergo suffering due to his sinful activities in his previous life. This science of transmigration is completely unknown to modern scientists. So-called scientists do not like to bother with these things because if they would at all consider this subtle subject matter and the problems of life, they would see that their future is very dark. Thus, they try to avoid considering the future and continue committing all kinds of sinful activities in the name of social, political, and national necessity. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmritam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master is kindly opening my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Okay, so first 27 verses, it's all about the dying process. King Paranjan's dying, and it's very painful because he's so attached and he's losing everything one by one. You know, we lose what? Everything. Think of whatever you're attached to materially. Hopefully, it's used in Krishna's service. So it's not a material attachment, but I mean, what if the Grim Reaper came in the room and said, all right, everybody here, you got to get out. In other words, I'm here. I'm not waiting 1 millisecond. You got to get out. So what will we think? Will we think of Krishna, or what I think of? What, my phone? I got to take my phone. You can't take the phone away from me. No. Or my money, or my bank balance, or whatever whatever we've made our most cherished association, whatever most cherished attachment. So, yeah, it's really hitting the fan now. I mean, there's nobody's going to save him. And you notice Prabhupada begins, it's not even in the Sanskrit, but he begins the verse by saying, King Puranjan continued worrying. So he's really highlighting it, he's really underscoring that this is what he's really concerned about as he's leaving his body, right? What's going to happen to my family members, not Krishna, yeah. So Puranjan's comparing his family after his death to shipwrecked passengers is just opposite of Naimisharanya sages who compared Sutta Goswami to a ship's captain. See, Puranjan didn't have a captain in the allegory. Of course, Narada Muni is Barhishat's spiritual master captain, and he's trying to wake him up. But in the allegory, Puranjan doesn't have a captain. He just attached to matter. They compared Sutta Goswami to a ship's captain to cross over the dangerous ocean of Kali. That's a famous verse, and let's take a look at it. Let's see if it's, no, okay, I think there's a painting of this. Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, it's in here somewhere. Okay. So famous verse, anybody know this one? It's 1:122. It's the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, questions by the sages. And Sutta Goswami, or the sages, are praising Sutta. Okay. Well, we think that we have met. Okay. I'll just say the English. We think that we have met your goodness, capital Y, capital G, your goodness, by the will of providence, just so that we may accept you as captain of the ship for those who desire to cross the difficult ocean of Kali, which deteriorates all the good qualities of a human being. I mean, it's really bad, dark age. And then in the purport, here's what Srila Prabhupada says. The age of Kali is very dangerous for the human being. Human life is simply meant for self-realization. But that's not the messages we're getting from everywhere. But due to this dangerous age, men have completely forgotten the aim of life. In this age, the lifespan will gradually decrease. People will gradually lose their memory, finer sentiments, strength, and better qualities. There was a famous case in New York City in 1964 where this made the cover of Life magazine. I remember when Life was still going. There was a lady, have you heard of Kitty Genovese? Okay, famous case. She was stabbed to death in New York City, and people heard her screaming, "Save me, help me, somebody." So this guy, somebody had just stabbed her, and then she started screaming. So the guy fled thinking that somebody's going to come to her aid, and then he saw that nobody was coming to her aid. So he came up and he stabbed her some more, just to make sure to finish her off. I forget why I think he was just nuts, crazy guy. And then this was on the headlines, stabbed to death. She was kind of a well-known in the Lower East Side, actually, it happened. And then Prabhupada came in 65, and even by 1965, they were still talking about it. So when he came to New York City, he was hearing about this. And then sometimes you hear you can hear on recordings, Prabhupada says, that people have lost their sympathy, just like in New York City. This lady nobody would come to her aid. They've lost their sympathy. Prabhupada would say sympathy. So it deteriorates all the finer sentiments. Strength and better qualities. A list of the anomalies for this age is given in the 12th canto of this work. So we've seen that. The people are so busy with sense gratification that they completely forget about self-realization. Out of madness, they frankly say that there is no need for self-realization, because they do not realize that this brief life is but a moment on our great journey towards self-realization. I remember in the 6th grade, we were doing a little a survey, just maybe a week, a survey. I was only 11 years old. I remember my teacher, Sidney Gold, Mr. Gold, and he said, and now the Hindus believe that this life is just one little piece of our existence. When, of course, he was thinking this life is the all in all. This is it. You got one shot, and you might as well make the most of it. But they believe that this life is just one little, and that we live before, and that we'll live again, reincarnation. Isn't that strange? I mean, he was really framing it in biased ways. Isn't that strange? Because in Judeo-Christian or with the Abrahamic religions, there is no reincarnation. Although it's there actually, but it's kind of hidden. But anyway, that was his take, and we were all, because we believe, we followed him. Oh yeah, that's pretty strange. Hey Frank, there's no need. Okay, the whole system of education, and here, okay, I'm glad I brought up that example. So, because Prabhupada mentions the whole system of education is geared to sense gratification. And if a learned man thinks it over, he sees that the children of this age are being intentionally sent to the slaughterhouses of so-called education. Intentionally means that people, yes, this is right. This is the goal of life, is sense gratification. So let's prepare people to be good sense enjoyers. That's Hiranyakashipu philosophy, and then we're going to see that in the Shringa's appearance. Learned men, therefore, must be cautious of this age. Learned men, yeah. And if they at all want to cross over the dangerous ocean of Kali, they must follow the footsteps of the sages of Naimisharanya and accept Sri Suta Goswami, or his bona fide representative, as the captain of the ship. The ship is the message of Lord Sri Krishna in the shape of Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam. So notice how Prabhupada says, learned men must be cautious of this age. So we have to be very careful of how we associate with everything, we see, hear, touch, smell, everything, because it's all trying to allure us to enjoy the senses. We have to know how the art of engaging the sense objects in Krishna's service, so that we don't get similarly ensnared. So that's from the first canto. We're going to look at something from the second canto too, but first, yeah. So King Parajan, he's worrying. Now, I want to bring up something. How we may let's contrast King Parajan's worry with Srila Prabhupada. Also, in his last year with us, he was very concerned. He was very worried that as his body was going through the dying process, but for many, many months, Srila Prabhupada was warning us. He was very worried. He was warning, especially leaders, GBCs, temple presidents, sannyasis. I don't know if you've heard this, but it's right in the database. He's don't make me another Alexander. Do you know what he meant? Okay, I'll explain.
Alexander the Great's empire fell apart within minutes of him dying.
Mm-hmm.
Alexander the Great's empire fell apart within minutes of him
Well, it was even before. Here's how it went. And I was reminded of this because I've been watching this podcast with Abhiram Prabhu, my godbrother, who was Prabhupada's nurse in his last year. And Abhiram heard Prabhupada say this. He said it to him personally, and he said it to Tamal Krishna Raj and other GBCs. And yeah, even though Alexander, at the height of his power, he was ruling from the Mediterranean all the way over the Punjab. He was, he invaded India too. Don't make me another Alexander. So here's what Prabhupada meant. It's something like what you said, Kirtaneshwar, but it's even more. He said, though Alexander the Great conquered territory from the Mediterranean to the Punjab, whoever Alexander left in charge of the lands he had conquered was unable to hold them. So Alexander's talent, his gift, he knew how to conquer. He knew how to conquer. He was a great, warrior, strategist, and he knew how to conquer. And he was very young. He only lived 33 years, by the way. I didn't know that.
What did you say?
Just.
What did you just say? What was the last comment?
He only lived for 33 years. Alexander. Yeah, and he lived in the 3rd century or 4th century BC. So anyway, he would conquer a place, and then he would keep going, and he would leave different people in charge of the place, but they were also generals. They were also conquerors, and they didn't know how to keep a place. They didn't know how to hold. They didn't know how to, win over the hearts of the people that they conquered, because you can't ultimately keep a place unless you win their hearts. So he just as soon as it was like a revolving door. He would, the people would go in and they'd come out, and then they'd leave. They'd leave the conquerors. The people who were conquered were no longer conquered because they wouldn't. They would just rebel, and the guy didn't know how to hold them. Right. So don't make me another Alexander. So Prabhupada, similarly, by 1977, Prabhupada had conquered. He had spread Krishna consciousness worldwide. He was a spiritual conqueror. He established the movement on all the major continents, except the poles, of course. Nobody's there. He had spread Krishna consciousness worldwide, but he was concerned that his leaders may not be able to keep the devotees that they were making and keep the temples and keep, it was expand. It was like booming, expand, expand, expand. But then the motto that Prabhupada especially made, and he said this early on too, but he was saying it more and more, was boil the milk. It's more important that you deepen your Krishna consciousness and you deepen those that you're inspiring now. Otherwise, you won't. It's like a revolving door, and it's sure enough. That's what happened, because we had a lot of problems after Prabhupada left, and a lot of people, they come into the movement, and then they leave, come in the front door and go out the back door after some time. So, boil the milk. Prabhupada warned us: deepen Krishna consciousness, engage devotees according to their varna and ashram. Srila Prabhupada. So his worry was different than Puranjan's worry. Puranjan's worried about, what's going to become of my family members. And so Prabhupada was worried that the movement wouldn't continue to be, potent. And Prabhupada was so potent that he was able to hold all of us, even though he was constantly traveling. We were hearing his voice, and then once in a while we'd see him maybe once a year. But he was concerned that we, who were not anywhere near his level of Krishna consciousness, wouldn't be able to continue the movement. He said, try to expand, at least maintain what I've given you. Hold it, keep it. Don't let it deteriorate. Now, in his purport to today's text, Srila Prabhupada says, every dying living being worries what will happen to his bodily kinsmen, his family members, his fellow fallible soldiers. There's a famous verse, which he's made the center of his life. Okay, so we're going to take a look at that fallible soldiers verse. Yeah, famous. This is really 2, 1, what, 4 or something? 2 and 3? No, it's 4. Yeah. All right, you know? Chadish atmasainesh vasatvapi teshang pramatto niranang pashyan napina pashyati. So this is Sukadev. Right? Yeah. Persons devoid of Atma Tattva, knowledge of self-realization, do not inquire into the problems of life, being too attached to fallible soldiers like a body, children, and wife. Although sufficiently experienced, they still do not see their inevitable destruction. And this is a real potent purport. This material world is called the world of death. Every living being, beginning from Brahma, whose duration of life is some thousands of millions of years, down to the germs who live for a few seconds only, is struggling for existence. Therefore, this life is a sort of fight with material nature, which imposes death upon all. In the human form of life, a living being is competent enough to come to an understanding of this great struggle for existence, but being too attached to family members, society, country, etc., he wants to win over the invincible material nature by the aid of bodily strength, children, wife, relatives, etc. Although he is sufficiently, I just heard a morning walk in Honolulu, listening, what is it? It's June 75, and somebody brings up, he said, Srila Prabhupada, everybody worships science now. They don't, religion is going out of fashion. The Prabhupada said, yes, churches are closing. And then he said, just like there's one famous person in America, his name is Walt Disney, Srila Prabhupada. And so before he died, they said, here's what we're going to do, Walt, and this is right in Walt's will. We're going to freeze you, cryogenics. This is still, I don't know if people still believe in this, but we're going to freeze you. And the promise was that as soon as we find the cure for the disease that's killing you, your body, we're going to go in there and inject your body with this, and then thaw you out, and you'll be fine. So, did you know this?
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, you're right. But then what happened was, it's crazy because, dying from a disease is only one way you can die, right? I mean, you can get hit by a truck, or there's so many ways you can die, or get scared to death, have a heart attack, So anyway, so they froze Walt in Florida, near Disney World somewhere, in a cryogenic vault. But then after that, the family members began to quarrel over the will, over who was going to inherit, Walt's assets. So then Walt had a brother named Roy Disney. So Roy somehow won in the court that he owned the assets. And what did he do? He pulled the plug on Walt. He pulled the plug on the vault. So Walt was no longer, frozen, preserved. His body wasn't preserved. Yeah. So these things are going on. One should examine the fact that his father or his father's father has already died, and that he himself is therefore also sure to die. And similarly, his children, who are the would-be fathers of their children, will also die in due course. No one will survive in this struggle with material nature. The history of human society, Prabhupada's hammering this again and again and again, because he knows that he's writing this, especially for the modern age where people are just brainwashed to think that they're the body. And so look, everybody's died. Your body's going to die. You got to wake up to reality, and you got to really learn about self-realization. You're not the body. Yet the foolish people still suggest that in the future they will be able to live in the future, right? The famous post-dated check. In the future, they will be able to live perpetually with the help of material science. This poor fund of knowledge exhibited by human society is certainly misleading, and it is all due to ignoring the constitution of the living soul. Yeah, that's why we don't want to die, because we don't die. But we misplace that sense of eternity on the body, and it's a very tragic situation. Otherwise, the living soul is always different from the material nature. The great ocean of material nature, this is famous, Prabhupada's very lyrical here, is tossing with the waves of time. And the so-called living conditions are something like foaming bubbles, which appear before us as bodily self, wife, children, society, countrymen, etc. Due to lack of knowledge of self, we become victimized by the force of ignorance and thus spoil the valuable energy of human life in a vain search after permanent living conditions which are impossible in this material world. My former wife texted me and she said, "You got to call Chandra. You got to call our daughter. She just told me she wants you to call her." So this was a week ago, Sunday. So I did. I called her, but she didn't answer. She didn't pick up. And so I put a voice message. "Please call me, Chandra. Mom says you want me to call you. So what's up? What's going on? You need some help?" So anyway, so she still hasn't answered after a week. So then I text Kate again, my former wife, and I said, "Hey, Kate, you know, it's been over a week since I put that message on Chandra's voicemail. You know, so what's happening here?" She said, I don't know, Suresvara, but why don't you try her again? You know, she's having a real hard time. Now, I know exactly where she is. She's in Brooklyn, New York. She's not far from the Brooklyn Temple. But, you know, she doesn't have good association. And her habits are down the tubes, you know. So I know she must be suffering. And if I thought that I could save her, if I was the doer, and that she would, you know, if it was just me and my daughter, then I would probably go there and try to save her, you know. But that wouldn't help if I was just a materialist. I know that, you know, when she's ready, I will be able to help her. I can't help her now as long as she insists on, you know, doing all the things that we swear to avoid when we take initiation. I mean, I can lend a sympathetic ear and not judge her. I can, you know, just be, a kind dad from a distance. But yeah, so. Our friends, relatives, and so-called wives and children are not only fallible, but also bewildered by the outward glamour of material existence. As such, they cannot save us. Still, we think that we are safe within the orbit of family, society, and country. We all really, what did Prabhupada say in today's purport? In the name of, we're coming back to that. Yeah, in the name of nationalism, something like that. Yeah, I'll look at it again. Okay, and then Prabhupada ends. The whole materialistic advancement of human civilization is like the decoration of a dead body. Everyone is a dead body, flapping. No one writes like this. Everyone is a dead body, flapping. You can picture a dead fish, right? Or a dying fish on a beach. Flapping. Everyone is a dead body, flapping only for a few days. This is what we're doing. As long as we're not pursuing, you know, Krishna consciousness, we're just flapping. Sometimes we're boogieing, sometimes we're, you know, whatever we think we're enjoying. Flapping only for a few days, and yet all the energy of human life is being wasted. In the decoration of this dead body, we're misers. if we're not using the body, the human form, to reconnect with Krishna, our beloved source. Shukadev Goswami is pointing out the duty of the human being after showing the actual position of bewildered human activities. Persons who are devoid of the knowledge of Atma Tattva are misguided. But those who are devotees of the Lord and have perfect realization of transcendental knowledge are not bewildered. Yeah, so, So am I not bewildered? Well, every day we get tested like that. Let's see what else. How are we doing? Okay, we're great. Yes. Okay, so we read the Atma Tattva. So the nature of this world is, most of us are just, struggling in material existence, and actually everybody is, but the nature of this world is that the more powerful we become in the material world, the more knowledge we get, or the more wealth we get, or the more fame, or the more deluded we become. We think that we're actually we got it together. We're going to control and enjoy in the material world. And this Prabhupada would refer. He would talk about, like, Prabhupada knew history, so he would talk about in French history. There was a famous king named Louis XIV, Louis XIV, the Sun King, who famously said, "L'État, c'est moi." The state, it's me. I am the state. And also later, Napoleon declared himself the Emperor of France, and he controlled much of what we know today as Europe. But as Srila Prabhupada would say, France is still here. He would say this on morning walks in France. So France is still here. Where is Napoleon? He's moved on. He wasn't in control. He was kicked out of that Napoleon body by the law of nature, and then who knows what he's doing. In his purport, Prabhupada also points out that wherever we go at death, our sinful reactions follow us. And then he said, quote, "It is not unusual for a politician to kill the opposing party." Prabhupada may have been thinking of his boyhood hero, Gandhi, who gave his life to free India from British rule, but he was killed by someone who didn't like his politics. A Hindu extremist, Nathuram Godse, came up to Gandhi after a prayer meeting, and Gandhi was finished. So that fact that he was murdered like that indicated some kind of, bad karma. Although he was a politician among saints, or a saint among politicians, he wouldn't let Prabhupada intervene in that karma. He didn't answer Prabhupada's letter. Probably he never saw it. And then within 7 months of Prabhupada writing that letter, Gandhi was assassinated. Now, Srila Prabhupada ends the purport by noting that materialistic scientists dismiss transmigration of the soul, because then they would have to admit accountability for their sinful activities in the next life. Yeah, let's look at that purport, that paragraph again. This science of transmigration is completely unknown to modern scientists. So-called scientists do not like to bother with these things, because if they would at all consider this subtle subject matter and the problems of life, they would see that their future is very dark. Because materialistic scientists are saying, yeah, we're matter, and just enjoy. And so all their advancement, all their medical advancement, and their, whatever, going to the moon, going to Mars, is just a distraction. It's a complete distraction from who we are, the reality is. Thus, they try to avoid considering the future and continuing committing all kinds of sinful activities, in the name of social, political, and national necessity. We got to do this. John F. Kennedy, JFK,
he was, he said, we are going to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. It's hard. We need a challenge. We're going to show the Soviets that we're the best. We're going to beat them. So that same, it's good determination. He had a bit of Kshatriya in him, heroism, power, determination, Drudha. But it's all misplaced. Yeah, it's all misplaced on the body. But we have to be similarly determined. Yes, that we won't let the illusory energy bait us and trick us. We're not going to fall for it anymore. We're going to be determined to go back to Godhead. Okay, so I'll just end by saying that, in these verses and purports, Narada Muni and Srila Prabhupada, they're warning us not to die like Paranjan, who foolishly worries about his family members. Again, back to the verse, like passengers aboard a ship wrecked in the midst of, he's thinking his family members, he says, their position will be similar to that of passengers aboard a ship wrecked in the midst of the ocean. Because when this is so foolish, when he himself, Paranjan, or all of us, is going down with a ship. He's going down with a ship. He can't help them. They can't help him. Ship of the body, lost without a captain to save him from the ocean of birth and death. And as we die, everything gets taken away from us, even our senses. What's the last sense that we lose? Yes, that's why. For example, when Vaikuntana passed away at Krishna's home, he hadn't been eating or drinking even. You had to force something down him, but then when the kirtan came, then he perked up. He responded. We knew that he was hearing the kirtan, even though he could barely move. Or like when Gunagrahi Maharaj was passing away in Vrindavan, two old friends were on either side of him. Bibi Govinda Maharaj, who had been Ayodhyapati, who knew him in Buffalo, and Burijan Prabhu, who had also knew him in Buffalo. They were all part of Rupa. They have all come to Krishna consciousness through Rupa Nuga's class, college class at UB. So they were old friends, and they were on either side of him as he was passing away. And this was all on FaceTime or what do you call it? It was all streamed live. And they were screaming at the top, one ear on one ear and the other one on the other ear. They were screaming the whole thing because they knew he could hear, even though by then he was gone. He couldn't do anything else. Okay, so we're going to be continuing it's just describing how Niranjan's leaving, finally thinking of it, and then the chapter abruptly changes when he becomes a woman in his next life. Paranjan, he becomes Vaidarbhi, the queen of Malayadvaja, and then finally, after describing all that, then Barhishat, king, gets it. Okay, I get it. So, again, today's verse, King Paranjan continued worrying, quote, after I pass from this world, how will my sons and daughters who are now fully dependent on me live and continue their lives? Their position will be similar to that of passengers aboard a ship wrecked in the midst of the ocean. Okay, yes, Prabhu.
Nice class, Prabhu, nice. Speaking of the boiling the milk, is nice. Prabhupada brings that up quite often. Can you tell us about, how much is that the responsibility of, like we could say for ourselves or as leaders, how much is the responsibility for boiling the milk as leaders, and how much is it as individual for the devotee? That we have to boil our own milk, so to speak. That leaders can try, but then if the devotee doesn't want to go deeper, then what can you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. Boiling the milk. Usually, the context of him saying that in letters was to leaders who Prabhupada would say, it's more important now to maintain the devotees we have than to make new devotees. Because what's the use of expanding? Because Prabhupada could see that people often were leaving, and that's because they weren't really, they really didn't have realization. They might have had some theoretical idea about Krishna consciousness and the food's nice and the people are nice and whatever. But then when the going got tough, they didn't get going back to Godhead. They would leave. But what do leaders do? Yad yada tadashi shreshtas. So whatever action performed by a great man, common men follow. So leaders do set the tone. And then, so if the leaders are really with the devotees, chanting and hearing, and reading and preaching, then that sets a whole kind of, as we say, ethos. It sets a culture. It sets a culture in the temple or in the farm or wherever it is, wherever the devotees are gathering. So, but it's true. It's up to everybody to pick up on the mood and get serious. But the leaders, especially, like they say on social media, influencers. People are influenced by others, and if they like somebody, then they'll want to, follow that person. So, at the time of death, everybody has to fly their own plane. Prabhupada mentions that. Yeah, but there's a lot of training in flight school. And they put you through the simulations, like for pilots and also for astronauts. They say these people that go through these programs, these are harder than the actual. When the things came up, the emergencies, we knew what to do because we were trained, and it was harder than actually what we went through up in space or up on the plane. Yes, Chandrika.
Krishna, you were saying about how Srila Prabhupada was really worried, towards the end. So, it seems like it's because of course, he was concerned about responsibility and commitment and truthfulness. So he wanted to make sure the disciples were following that. Just like how Queen Kunti was asking Krishna to bring the Pandavas back. It's the same thing, like she was concerned or she wanted to make sure, and then because the Pandavas came back, she felt that sense of commitment and truthfulness and responsibility.
What do you mean come back?
From the Kurukshetra, from the battlefield.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like that commitment to make sure.
Yeah, she couldn't. She followed the Pandavas in exile, but she couldn't follow them to the battlefield. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, Prabhupada was concerned that we weren't Krishna conscious enough. And this is so common. The charismatic leader comes, and then he leaves, and then everything he established falls apart. So Prabhupada didn't want that. Don't make me another Alexander, where it's all going to just fall apart, and then we'll just have another religion. People will be practicing something that's not actually going to be able to inspire people to overcome the culture of sense gratification in the world, because all the religions are compromised by sense gratification. So he didn't want that. He wanted to give people a higher taste through prasadam, through kirtan, through knowledge, through the realization, through being in a higher consciousness. Yeah. So, it's a great responsibility. We all have it to And we can't give what we don't have, so we have to become Krishna conscious so we can give it to others. Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's one reason I stayed here. When I came in 2016, I said, hey, I like this place. It's Krishna conscious, and the leader gets up early, and she chants her rounds, and this is pretty cool. I like this. Can I stay here? Nandasam Damini? Yeah, sure. Okay. All right, it's getting kind of late. Happy Ekadashi, everybody. And tonight, Raj is going to bring a new member into our community. You're going to pick up Mataji at midnight out here. Did you hear your assignment yet? Maybe I'm breaking the news.
She kind of told me to this guy. Now it is reminding me.
Yeah, it's today.